Hi, grief class. This is Commissioner Marseglia, and I am back with Module 5, which is actually now Module 5A and 5B. When I started off this class, I had it separated, as many people do, into complicated grief and traumatic grief. But the reality is there is so much back and forth between the two that I think they need to be more combined. So instead of having 8 weeks of 8 modules, we will have 7 different modules over the course of 8 weeks. And that's because 5A will be 1 week and 5B will be the other week. So let me just start with talking about, just in general, what complicated grief is. I will be doing a voice thread in a little bit that will give you specific information, and there will be slides. But really, there's 3 things that I need to say about complicated grief. It has to do with people who have had a grieving experience, who have had a loss, and don't appear to be getting well again. They don't appear to be doing any healing. It is a very judgmental, kind of circumstantial thing, because it is difficult to describe when someone's going too far in their grief or too deep in their grief or isn't getting better unless you know the circumstances of their grief. So I'm just thinking of an example. If you had a 7-year-old girl who lost her mother suddenly in an accident and you thought that she should be better in a year, I think you'd probably be wrong. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with her grieving 10 and 15 years later. The hope is that she is still functioning and able to have healthy relationships, but she still may be grieving. On the other hand, if you have someone who lost a neighbor, maybe they were close to the neighbor, but 10 years later they are still struggling with depression and can't stop talking about, thinking about that neighbor, there might be more going on there. There's probably a reason that their grief is so complicated. There is this, I think one of the slides will talk about how your grief is complicated if it exceeds a year or if it exceeds 3 years. You know, my daughter died 14 years ago. I still talk about her every single day. So does that mean that I have complicated grief? Maybe not if we compare it to the fact that 14 years ago, when she first died, I was talking about her every minute. And 7 years later, I was probably talking about her every hour. And a few years ago, maybe it was just 3 times a day, and now I'm down to once. So that's the key, though. Is the person still functioning, and are they healthy and able to meet their obligations in life? The other thing that I just wanted to talk about is that it also depends on the type of loss and your coping style and the kind of supports that you have in place. So you can minimize the risk of having a complicated grief by having supports in place, by having a strong sense of self, by having experienced losses in life that have taught you how to be resilient once you have them. So as we go through this, please remember how relative this can be and how there is no one easy answer for what complicated grief is. We need to take it case by case. So glad to talk to you. We'll be in this module for Part A and Part B, and you know how to reach me. Remember that this work that we're doing and what we're learning about is difficult, so reach out to me if you need some assistance. Thanks.